Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Terry Holland, trainer of NLP, hypnosis, and timeline therapy.
My name is Stefano Casalter, and tonight we are going to touch upon how to give emotional speeches.
Mhm.
It's not where you begin, it's where you leave them that really matters. So tonight we're going to learn to make emotional speeches and to impact your audience the most. I love your glasses, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Give us a thumbs up if you love Terry's glasses. And a
Thanks.
thumbs up if you don't too.
Nice. Nice.
So these are huge lessons in public speaking. And I wish I would have known this when I first started. I used to tell some pretty heavy emotional stories, and I never really knew how to deal with it properly because it never really resonated properly with my audience.
Mhm.
Now, why don't we start out? I want to tell you a little story about our friend Greg, who recently delivered an emotional speech. It was a speech about his daughter's birthday. Now, Greg has a natural talent. He gets up there and he gains rapport with the audience right away. He's got lots of little talents on getting likability right away from his audience, and you really feel what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So he talked about when he first met his daughter. His daughter was adopted, and he met her when she was 2 years old. And the beauty of it was he would show it in his voice and his emotions about how close they became. And as soon as he saw her, they knew that she was the right fit for their family. Little girl suffered from FAS, which had its own challenges. But he shared her connection with him and the connection with the family. He shared stories about how she excelled in sports. And it was a perfect mix of stories showing their connection with each other, and you could just feel the love when he was talking about it. He also talked about how she became a champion for people with FAS.
Mhm.
And then he concluded the speech. It was about her birthday. It was held on the memorial bench. All the family was there. And they shared the memory of her. She would have been 28. And they lost her to mental illness 3 years ago. Can you feel that emotion?
Yep.
He was in tears himself, and the audience was as well. And there may or may not have been tears in my eyes. And I just everybody wanted to just hug him and hold him. And we all felt that connection of personal loss in ourselves from that story. And that's where he ended the story. He walked off the stage, and there was such an emotional impact that everybody was stunned. It was like a punch in the gut of power. Now, how could Greg have made this emotional speech even better than Ray was? Well, let me first start out by saying Greg is a beginning speaker. He's hasn't delivered a lot of speeches, and he showed massive gains, and he's got so many natural talents and is starting to discover these things, and it shows in his speech crafting.
For sure.
And he's much further ahead than I was, the same rate of my journey. Thanks a lot. First of all, it's not where you begin, but where you leave them that matters. And it was hard for people to continue after this speech because we're in such a unique state of sadness. Now, what if Greg would have added a message that can resonate through the speech? Now, we're always going to come back to message because message is the most important part of impactful speechcraft.
For sure.
it's the backbone of it. And your audience always remembers your opening, your conclusion, as my mentor used to say, the golden magical weave of the message that just ties it all together.
Right.
Now, what if he was to add a message to this? That's the essence of it. If you bring your audience down, you have to be able to bring them back up again. People want to feel inspired and motivated. That's the purpose we have. Now, I'm sure there may be certain situations where you want to leave people like that, but 99% of the time you don't.
Right.
So delivering an emotional speech with a pure message that lifts you up again is not just like the punch in the gut. He also kisses you better afterwards. So let's go back and think about what kind of virtues we could attach to this message. So we know Greg has a story to tell. It's an emotional story about the loss of his daughter. So if I were in his shoes, or if you have a sad story you want to tell as well, what did you experience that you could pass on to others? What did you learn from the whole experience? And what virtue can you tie it into to make your message powerful and to bring that story right into it? So let's, for example, think maybe there's some possible message. For instance, there's lots of them, obviously. It's one story. How about some things were meant to be regardless of the outcome, for example? That could be companionship, or celebrate the good things and don't dwell on the past. There's another possible message that you can use there. That's in for mindfulness and perspective. People live in our memories and our hearts forever. Spirituality. You could even think about this way. What if Greg was to talk about her courage? She became a champion for people with FAS. So maybe there was a way that he learned something from her that changed his life and that he could pass on to other people. So these are the things that you must build into your emotional speeches. Think about it. How could I uplift my audience so they feel even better? Don't get me wrong. You want to elicit emotion. That's our job. You want to make people laugh. You want to make them cry. You want to make them angry. You want to make them everything. But you leave them in a better state than they first came off. So this kind of gets into one of the things that I learned from you. And I think it's an important lesson for everybody, because if you want your audience to follow you, you must go first.
Right.
And that's one of the most powerful lessons I learned from you and from NLP, was the state you're in when you're speaking is the state that your audience will follow you into.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you're speaking, you get into rapport with your audience. And rapport is a magical state. It's something we do naturally. And it's something in NLP that we teach how to elicit rapport. It's also a natural state of being. And rapport, it's a very magical state. We talk about it a lot in NLP and hypnosis, where your audience, when you're a speaker, your audience becomes very suggestible, and it's like they're in a trance with you, and they're in your trance. So whatever you feel, they're going to feel it with you. And that's a really positive thing. That means you can elicit positive emotions in people. It also means that if you're experiencing a negative state on stage, your audience feels that too. And I think in that, there's a really great responsibility in taking care of your audience through that. And it's okay to have them feel those deep, heavy emotions and then being able to take them out of that. I think if you come from the perspective that you care for your audience and you want to make sure that they're in a positive state when you leave, when you finish, I think that's a great skill for a speaker to have.
And let's think about, in Greg's speech,
Yeah.
did you feel when he was talking about his daughter, wasn't he feeling those feelings when he was on stage? Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the secret to eliciting emotion in your audience, is you have to feel it. And the way to do that is to recall a time when you felt that way. And it's easy when you're story, because as you're sharing it, if you allow yourself to feel those things, you're eliciting that state in yourself, and your audience will go along with you. Now, let's say if you're not sharing a personal story and you want to elicit an emotion, you just recall a time when you felt the thing you want to feel. And as you recall that time in your memory, you go right back to that time into your body, and you see what you saw, you hear what you heard, and you feel the feeling that you want to be feeling. Now, this is also powerful before you step on stage. If you want to be a really confident speaker, you recall a time before you go on stage, you recall a time when you felt totally confident, a specific time where you felt totally confident. And as you think of that time in your memory, you go right back to that time into your body, and you see what you saw, you hear what you heard, and you feel the feeling of being totally confident. And if you do that before you go on stage, you'll elicit that emotion of being totally confident when you step on stage. And the same thing goes for any feeling that you experience with you. As long as you feel it, they will go with you.
That's an amazing lesson. And anybody that's fighting with the fear of public speaking, just channeling that energy into yourself is so powerful. When I was a young speaker a few years ago, I had seen this guy get up on stage, and he had just amazing presence. And it was something that I just could not replicate. But then I tried closing my eyes before I went on stage, and I channeled that kind of energy, that feeling inside of me. And I didn't have it in myself, but I could picture myself as him. And it gave me the confidence and strength to fight my fear of public speaking.
Right.
But it was all my state, getting into my state.
For sure. The best states to elicit are ones that are natural, the ones that you've felt before. So if you have a memory of feeling that way, and if you don't, then imagine if you did feel that way.
Good
which
point.
is what Steph did. Yeah.
So that's an important thing. If you want your audience to follow, you must go first. Yeah. How about some tips on gaining rapport from your audience?
Well, the easiest way I think to gain rapport is, first of all, breathing. Breathing, whether you're one-on-one or one-to-many, breathing helps establish rapport. We do teach in our trainings, we teach how to establish group rapport, which is, I don't know if it's something we can teach in a video. Yeah, the easiest is make sure you're breathing. You want to use language that captures your whole audience. So some people are more visual, some people are auditory, some are kinesthetic, which means feeling. So you want to use language that captures both visual language, auditory, and kinesthetic. So you would say things like, look, today we're going to talk. So look is visual, talk is auditory. We're going to talk about some things. And you could say something like, it feels really good in here tonight, doesn't it? Or how's everyone feeling tonight? You capture your kinesthetic people, and you find ways where you can weave that language in through your speech. And that's another way to gain rapport, is now you're speaking everyone's language. Everyone in the room is interested in what you have to say.
Hey, Ty, Tracy, and Ernie, thanks for tuning in. Thumbs up and love to you guys too.
Yeah, so those are some ways you can establish rapport with your group. And then we teach some techniques for establishing a deeper sense of rapport when you're talking to a group.
Body language is important as well. And this is one important thing, is you need to appear confident, even if you don't feel confident. And I hate to say this, but sometimes you have to fake it until you can actually make it. Yes, it sure is. It is magic, and that's
Yeah.
one of the fun things that happens when you start speaking to an audience and you start getting rapport is you start to feel it. I think one of the analogies I always use is your speaker, it's like conducting an orchestra. So
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
start to elicit the emotions, you start to feel people move with you. You start to see people get drawn into your stories. And if they're not, if you have people that are sitting they're like this, crossing their arms, you know that you don't have enough rapport.
Yes.
Unless it may be somebody that's uncomfortable, or maybe it's somebody that's cold. But if you see a lot of people doing the same sort of thing, it could be a signal to you that you don't have enough rapport.
It can be. It's also important to recognize someone who's highly kinesthetic will naturally sit that way when they're engaged.
Yes, that's true. When I get drawn into this all the time because I focus so much on my audience that when I see someone that's sitting like that, crossing their arms, I automatically think, oh no, this guy's closed off. So I tend to get focused on that person and get drawn into trying to draw that person in. And this one time I could not do anything about it. He just sat there with his arms crossed, staring at me. And I was like, oh man, I just blew it.
Yeah.
After, the guy came backstage and he's like, that was awesome. That was amazing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. I wasn't getting the body language signals that people usually put out. So that is a good message. It's not always a sure thing. Look for clusters, which can help.
Yeah. Yeah. That's more, I think, more important to look at. And it's also when you are in rapport with the audience, or when you're in rapport one-on-one, anytime you have rapport, you feel it. So if you trust that internal feeling that you feel connected, and even if you're, not in tune with energy, or that's not your thing, it doesn't matter. When you're in rapport with someone or with a group, it feels good. So if you trust that internal feeling, you'll know that you're in rapport with your audience. Situation where I was speaking and there was a woman and she was like scowling at me and her arms were crossed and she was scowling. And it was the same thing. I thought she absolutely hated it. And she loved what I was saying. She came up to me afterwards. She told me she really enjoyed my talk and that it made her think. So that was her really thinking about what I was saying. It had nothing to do with whether she enjoyed it or not. So when you talk about body language, if you look at each individual in your audience, you may misread them. So go with how you feel. If you feel a connection to the group, you're engaged. Obviously, if they're looking at their phones and like not even watching you, you're completely checked out. So that's a good indication you don't have rapport. If they're talking to each other, you don't have rapport. If they're watching you and they look like they're listening, you probably have rapport. Huh? Thanks, Steph. That's nice. Yeah. So there are a few indications of rapport, and if you feel it, if you feel like you have the audience, that they're connected with you, they probably are. Yeah. You'll also notice there's some clues to group rapport too, because they'll be in rapport with themselves. And so if you notice that, and this is getting a little bit more advanced, but if you notice that someone in the audience, say they shift their position, and then you see a ripple through the group. So you'll see a ripple of people and they're all sort of shifting. Or someone, like, they scratch their head and then someone does this and someone else does that, and you'll see a ripple of movement through the group. That means that person who started that is the leader. They're leading the rapport of the group. And then it's really easy for you as a speaker. You just make sure you're in rapport with that person. As long as you have them, you have the room. You can look for waves of movement. And then if you can find where that wave of movement begins, that's the leader of the group. And it may not be the leader, like I say, the organizer of the event. It's not that person. It's just whoever the group feels most rapport with. And this happens all unconsciously. It can't be controlled. And that's getting a little bit more advanced. Something that we train trainers to do is to be really aware of that group dynamic and the group rapport.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
And I think that's when a lot of people think that body language is just one thing whatsoever, but it isn't. And that's where a lot of people go wrong. It's, if you want to read somebody, gesture clusters are a good thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really individual. A lot of people want to say this when a person sits like this or when they do this thing, it means X. And we're far more individual than that when it comes to body language. So in NLP, we teach that you calibrate the person. So you take a snapshot of that person individually in your mind. And what does this person look like when they enjoy something? What do they look like when they're not enjoying something? And then you calibrate that person. I've given a few talks specifically on body language. And when I've talked about this, I've had people come up to me and say, thank you for saying that, because they're very kinesthetic people. And when a kinesthetic person is sort of slouches and crosses their arms, they're feeling what you're saying. They're completely physically invested. But they've had experiences where people have said to them, oh, you're not listening to me, or you're completely checked out because of their posture, but they feel like I'm really engaged. Yeah. So there's no one size fits all when it comes to body language. If the group has checked out, though, you'll know. You'll have a feeling of it. You won't feel connected. It won't have that good, warm feeling of rapport, and people will be distracted doing other things.
So those are some great lessons tonight. I think that rapport is huge. If you don't have rapport of your audience, they're not going to get your message.
Yeah.
And connection is key. Connection is key. Think about, you're a gas tank or a gas pump as your message, and you want to get your message into a car, which is your audience. You have to connect the hose to the car if you want to get any of your message in it. So if you don't get your rapport right off the bat. Oh, and here's a little trick. If you want to get rapport, show a little bit of vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Vulnerability breaks down that wall with your audience. Another good one is tell a self, make fun of yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That usually. Sorry?
Make sure they have to see you as human.
Absolutely.
And to relate to you. So if you're, I've seen those kind of speakers, I'm sure we all have, who they appear to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to connect with them. So as a speaker, you want to be on their level. You want them to see like, hey, this person is just like me. Mm-hmm. And when they can see themselves in you, in a bit of your story or your experience or your humor or how you stand, anything, then they start to feel like this person's just like me. That's rapport. And now you can lead them where you want to lead them with your message.
Absolutely. If you put yourself up on a pedestal, you're putting your audience down. Yeah, you're not going to get that rapport that you need in order to get your message across. And this is a mistake I've made before. And a lot of beginning speakers do this as well. They think, well, I have to have this persona of this great speaker. And if you look at a lot of the great speakers show a lot of vulnerability. It's the quickest way to get into your audience's mind.
Yep. Yeah. And I think it's also important when we're talking about vulnerability that you still need to maintain a sense of composure on stage and not completely fall apart. So I think that's really important, and I see a lot of new speakers do this, is they sort of, I don't want to say wallow in the emotion, but kind of wallow in it a little bit sometimes, or give into it a bit too much. I think it's really important that you speak from the solution of your problem and not from the pain of it. Because remember, you're there to deliver a message to this audience. And if you're consumed by emotion, then you can no longer relate that effectively. So there is a sense of you have to feel it and be vulnerable, and at the same time be mindful of you're sharing a message with this audience and how they're going to be receiving it.
Good point. Can you say that again? Speak from the
solution, not the pain.
Not the pain of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I like that. I'm going to use it as my own.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's really important. I know that when I was starting out as a speaker, I thought like the more heavy the emotion and the more I felt it, then the better it was. And I think we're at a point with society today, sort of in our Western world especially, where people are very detached from their feelings. When they feel something, they get excited, right? They enjoy, like they feel something, so they feel this must be good because I feel crappy now. This must be a good speaker because I want to go cry. And yeah, because they're feeling something. They're feeling something. And people, I think, are in a sense almost hungry for feeling something today.
Mm-hmm.
And while that can be cathartic in one sense, when you leave your audience, you want to make sure that you put them in a positive state. Take care of them. You want to take care of your audience and your people.
Yeah, hang on. Let me give my son crap here. Giovanni! Okay, come on. All I hear is video games behind me. That's what I love about live. You can't cut it out.
No, it's real life.
I want to thank Greg so much for letting us use his example, because I was so struck by it. It was such a powerful, emotional speech that I thought that everybody could learn from it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we all have those stories inside of us. Mm-hmm. And everybody can connect to them. Everybody can feel that emotion. Just add that message to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Speak from the solution goal. There's another one for one of yours. What about my one-liners?
Sure.
Yeah. That is brilliant.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But it was, that came to me because I had to learn it. And it was really when I was watching another speaker and I was thinking I was dissecting my mind, like, why is the audience having this? Their faces, they were all struggling. They were all feeling this deep, intense emotion. They were all hurting for the speaker. And this particular speaker, she didn't bring people out of it after. Mm-hmm. And I could feel that energy in the room. And I thought, what would make this different? And that's where I came up with that, is that if she had spoken from the solution of the problem where she is now, not where she was then. Mm-hmm. And that makes such a difference.
Yeah. So it's not just where you begin. It's where you leave your audience that really matters.
Yeah. Someone quote Stefano on that.
Please.
That is a good one. It is a good one.
And what was the other message we had there? If you want them to follow, you must go first. There's the other takeaway, is always be willing. Oh, thanks, Tracy.
He has your back. Yeah.
So any questions anyone has? Anything you want us to answer?
Yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to post them.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Tracy.
Another one for you. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. Feel free, if these are beneficial to you, feel free to like them for us and share them if you think others will benefit from them as well. I think I love doing these. These are a chance for us to share our knowledge, everything that we've been through and everything that we've discovered. I wish I had someone to tell me these things when I was first starting out, because it would have saved me years. Hey, thanks, Ty.
Thanks.
And
yeah,
so share it with someone that you think it would help, and it helps us as well.
For sure.
And if there's anything I want to learn, let us know. Leave a comment. Say, I'd love to learn about this, and 99.999% positive that we can talk about it and share some of her wisdom as well.
Yeah. So we're doing these every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on the Complete Speakers page. So if you check that out, the page that you're on right now, obviously. So make sure, and you can subscribe for notifications on these videos too. So if you want to be notified every time that we're doing one, somewhere on the page there's a notification button, click it and ask for the notifications, and then you'll always know. Oh, there's a question from Tracy. Is preparation the key to getting to the message underlying the story? Example, the emotion.
Preparation the key to getting to the message underlying the story, i.e. the emotion. Do you mean like mastering the motion so you don't break down while you're talking about it? Or preparation is key for anything.
Yeah.
In my opinion, when it comes to speechcraft. You want to, if there's an emotional story that you want to tell and you're really not ready to tell it, I would wait until you're ready. And preparation can help with that too, because the more you practice it, the more in touch with it you become. You become a little desensitized to it, so you're not overwhelmed with emotion when you tell the story. Yeah. I wasn't sure if that was helpful, but.
Yeah. She clarified that's part of it, but unpacking the message. Yes. To uncover what the message is, it's important that you prepare your speech and write it out. I used to not write out my speeches, and I really struggled with that. And I learned that from Stefano, that I needed to write my speech so that I could have a really clear message. And that changed my speaking. I used to just wing it, or I would practice, but I would just sort of wing it while practicing. I would improvise it and just do it enough times that I kind of had the same speech every time I would do it. And when I started to write it, then it became very clear what the message was and very intentional.
Well, you're amazing before you started writing it too, so I wouldn't, yeah. Unpacking the message, one thing you can do is, as I stated in one of our videos, is do a 10 by 10 by 10, which is write out 10 different messages that you could tell with using this story.
Yeah.
In 10 words or less, in words that a 10-year-old can understand. And this is a really important exercise because it's difficult, but it forces you to dig deep into the story and think, what did I learn? What did I learn from this? You know, what could I teach other people from this? What is the power behind the story? What is it that makes it what it is? And how can I pass that off to other people? And these things will come when you start thinking, brainstorming about different possible messages. Things start popping out. Things you never thought of before will start coming out. Write them all down and keep them. Even if you don't think they're relevant now, they may become relevant in the future. In my story journal, I've got, for every story that I have 10, 20, 30 different possible messages. And I can take that one story, search down that list of possible messages, and find something impactful that I could share with the proper audience. It's kind of like building your arsenal. So the 10 by 10 by 10 is a good way to start unpacking the message.
Yeah, really good tip. Yeah. Are there any other questions? If you're watching the replay later on and you have a question, feel free to add that into the comments, and we're happy to answer those as well. I think that's it. Yeah.
That was fun.
Well, that was fun.
Yeah.
All right. So thanks for joining us, and feel free to share this with your friends if you feel like someone would benefit from watching it. And we'll be back again next week.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.
Good night now.